and welcome to the 163rd edition of the Illegal Motion College Football Podcast. In Nashville, Tennessee, I'm the professor, Matt Perkins. And a skinny post across the Harpeth River from me here in the Music City, it's our own offensive coordinator, the coach, Corey Burton.
What's going on, man? Another week, another show, some more recaps, some great college football this past weekend. Hillwood ruined some homecoming, so that was good. We got the victory 38-20 over Cheatham Central. We avenged a 40-0 beatdown a year ago, so I'm excited about that, and I'm excited to get the show on the road.
Yeah, Coach, you had a pretty great weekend. Your dogs won, Hillwood Hilltoppers won, and your son turned 3.
Yep.
Had a big old party with a lot of food.
Oh, yeah. Definitely a lot of food. Still eating the Mexican leftovers to this day.
Excellent. Well, someone else who enjoys Mexican leftovers, our third amigo in the second city, a man whose car is faring about as well as Virginia Tech's ego at this moment. It's our own intrepid blogger from Big Ten and Counting, Josh Cook.
Yeah, crazy 48 hours for me. My car totally died. And got the tow truck and
that makes two of us, John.
Ship, and turned out that a piece that kind of connects the axle to a shaft that helps with your steering. There's 2 of them on the car, and the left side one broke clean off. Their best guess was that one of Chicago's infamous potholes might have weakened it, and then when I was doing the sharp left turn to get into my parking spot, that then was too much stress on it. But considering what I thought it was, I thought it might have been an engine seize up, which for any car people out there, pretty much like that's game over. That's multiple $1,000 rebuild, if not turning the car into scrap. To get away with just an $800 parts, labor, and tax bill, I'll take that.
All right. Well, that means all 3 of us have had our car in the shop within the last month.
What happened to yours, Coach?
3 of the 4 cylinders in a 4-cylinder engine went kaput.
So now it's just a 2-stroke engine.
It's a 1-stroke engine. And it's about a $6,000 rebuild. So guess what? Coach is going to be driving a new vehicle.
All right. Well,
probably a 2002 Suburban with 220,000 miles for free 75.
So, our cars are doing about as well as our picks this year, guys.
Our picks have been amazing.
Well, it's has become par for the course. It was not our best weekend. Josh, you and I both went 1-4. Coach, you were a little bit better at 2-3. We were all on the wrong side of the South Carolina Vandy game. We all picked Vandy to cover. South Carolina doubled them up. Northern Illinois at Florida State, we all took Northern Illinois. Obviously, Florida State looked more like the program we expected them to. Josh and Coach both correctly picked NC State as 6-point favorites at Marshall. I was on the right side of Arizona State plus 17 at Washington, and Coach got Baylor covering that 7.5-point spread against the Jayhawks. On the season, I'm 9-11. Coach is 7-13. Josh, you and your car are pulling up the rear at 6-14. And with that, first quick slant is all yours. I know.
Look, I've just been unlucky with my picks on the blog. I'm a very Cleveland Browns-esque 27-27-1 right now.
Ooh.
So, yeah,
I like that. But I know you're concerned with, I guess, what we can call the Tech subdivision of the ACC.
I am, and I think with Virginia Tech, it's pretty obvious. They lost to Old Dominion. Maybe they were disinterested. I don't know, but that Florida State win, obviously the shine has kind of come off that game with the Noles sitting at 2-2. They beat up on William and Mary, had a game canceled. So ODU, that's supposed to be their tune-up before hitting ACC play, and they no-showed. And they gave up about a bazillion yards. Blake LaRue, so the great story. The kid comes in off the bench, 30 of 49, 495, 4 touchdowns, no picks. But that's just part of the story. Old Dominion also ran the ball really well. Jeremy Cox, 130 yards on 20 carries, 2 touchdowns. Bud Foster's defense was really, really young, and we sort of assumed after that Florida State game, oh, no, they're going to be amazing. It's safe to say, it's safe to say that defense has a lot of growing pains, and now they have to face a good Duke team. Then they host Notre Dame, who suddenly looks different with their quarterback change. For a team that, myself included, I kind of, after that Florida State game, penciled them into the ACC title game. They got some kinks to figure out. But the real dire strait for the Tech division of the ACC has got to be Georgia Tech. They're now 1-3 on the year with their lone victory coming against Alcorn State, and they're just not putting up very many points against competent defenses. Just 19 at Pitt, just 21 against Clemson, and they're just not efficient. They're running the ball with a 2.6 average against Clemson. I know that's a great defensive line, but that's terrible. And then their passing game, Taquan Marshall was supposed to have a much better arm than we've seen Georgia Tech have. Well, he was just 1 of 6 against Clemson. There was a shakeup on the defensive side of the staff. I haven't seen the Georgia Tech defense be much better. And again, much like Virginia Tech, this is kind of in danger of falling off the wheels. I know they got Bowling Green and Louisville next, but then after that, they host Duke. They head to Virginia Tech. They host Miami. They head to Georgia. I think a bowl might even be questionable now at this point in the year, and I don't know what that does to Paul Johnson's job security.
I mean, if you're Virginia Tech, you really got to worry about Josh Jackson, and now that he's going to be out,
Yep.
What are they going to do going forward? Coach, I know even though you were celebrating Huck, you had time to watch the Georgia game on Saturday.
Yeah, we didn't invite people over and get our family members, I should say. We kept it to family members, which even that gets out of hand sometimes because Laura and I both have rather large families. But we had time. The Georgia game kicked off at 11 Central, so I was able to watch that game while I was helping Laura and my mother and my aunt prep the house for the party and prep the food and do everything you need to do before a party, which, some of the things we did, you would think we're having a, party for 60 people. But and sometimes at some points in the night, it did feel like we had 60 people there. But
as long as there was Laura's buffalo chicken dip, it was a good party.
Yes, we did not have that though. It was Mexican themed. We had
buffalo chicken dip goes with everything.
I know, but she was busy making the tacos and the stuff you enjoyed Sunday, Matt. So I guess that was a good sacrifice. But I know I was texting with you guys, and I guess it was kind of a busy day because I didn't hear from either one of you most of the day. But this was probably one of the weirdest games I've ever watched Georgia play. Like, I felt like I felt like Georgia dominated, because every time I turned around, there's some sort of turnover. But then it seemed on the flip side of it that Georgia didn't have many answers for Drew Lock, and Drew Lock just proved how talented he is. He's 7th nationally in total offense. Missouri is led by Drew Lock, who had 11 touchdown passes. So, but what's even more impressive is out of all of that, Georgia held Luck without a touchdown pass. But the concerning part about this game for the Georgia defense is the 172 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns on the ground, something that Georgia prides themselves on as far as being able to be extremely tough against the run. The 7 penalties for 66 yards is something that's very uncharacteristic of this dog team, and it was just one of those things where it just felt like every bit of momentum that the Dogs could have had for a blowout just seemed to go right out the window with a huge penalty here, a huge penalty there, a 3rd and 6 and they get 7 on the ground, or just something like that, or Drew Lock completes a big pass on 2nd and 12, or they commit a penalty and we give them the yardage back, or just doing everything that they could possibly do to give back the momentum. But a couple of young guys really showed out. Eric Stokes, he had a blocked punt and recovered it himself for a touchdown. So another special teams touchdown for the Dogs against against MTSU, Mecole Hardman ran a punt back for a touchdown. This week, Eric Stokes blocks one and recovers it for a touchdown. So a young guy getting involved in it. Tyson Campbell, another young defensive back, stripping Missouri tight end Albert. I'm not even going to try to say that. Albert O. And he took it 68 yards to the house. So, that's some things that Georgia did to kind of get that momentum. Jake Fromm, again, another solid day, 3 touchdown passes. Riley Ridley, Jeremiah Holloman, and Mecole Hardman. Elijah Holyfield was leading rusher, 14 carries, 90 yards. And DeAndre Swift had 16 for 71. So very impressive day for the Dogs. Very good road wins. Always good to win on the road. So overall, 43-29, you'd love to see that score. But again, it just felt weird. I wasn't disappointed. I was like, man, this is just a weird game.
Coach, I know it's early on the season and Kentucky's ranked, and that's awesome. South Carolina looked really good against Vanderbilt. Maybe they've shaken off the big whooping that your Dogs gave them, but it wouldn't surprise me by the end of the season, once it all shakes out, for Missouri to finish second in the division. I think the complexion of this game might change entirely.
They have found a ground game. I'm telling you, they looked really good running the football, and I was impressed. And Drew Lock is. I said in the preview, I did a quick slant on Missouri, and Drew Lock is doing a tremendous job with this. So I'm Demarie Crockett, Larry Roundtree, and Tyler Batty is those are 3 guys that are great at running the ball. And if they can find what Missouri didn't have last year was balance. They were launching around us, but they really didn't have much of a run game. This year it seems like they found a run game, and they're so much more dangerous through the air. So yeah, Josh, I wouldn't shock me, man. It really wouldn't. But it's just good to get that win on the road.
All right. Well, for my quick slant today, I want to talk about 2 group of 5 programs that are going in opposite directions. So, Josh, should I start with the good or should I start with the bad?
Maybe the ugly.
And do the bad.
All right. So, gentlemen, it's time for an intervention.
Ooh, I like it.
Intervention is going to be taking place in Fort Collins. We got to talk about our dear Fighting Bobos. The Rams lost this past weekend by 16 at home to FCS Illinois State.
Redbirds, great basketball school.
Yeah, not so much as a football school though. I mean, they finished last year at 6-5, and were not a real factor in the Missouri Valley.
Well, maybe Bobo. The Fighting Bobos, maybe they just need change at the top. I mean, Coach Bobo's got some health issues. Maybe he just needs to step away and take care of that stuff. And because you saw, anytime you watch Colorado State, you see him limping around on the sideline. So maybe that's more of a distraction than we think.
Yeah, and it would have been one thing if it was sort of like a fluky game. There were a bunch of turnovers or whatnot, but they were unlucky in the red zone. But it wasn't even that. The Redbirds outgained Colorado State by nearly 150 yards, forced 2 turnovers without coughing up the ball once. Rams quarterback KJ Carter-Samuels was benched midway through this game in lieu of Colin Hill, but it didn't matter because neither of them could find a consistent way to move the ball. Bobo has finished 7-6 in each of his first 3 seasons at the helm, but the team seems to be stagnating at this point. I'm not sure if it's mental or physical for them, but like Coach just said, something needs to change. The Rams are now 1-4 and still have most of their conference slate ahead of them. I mean, they've got to go on the road to Boise State. It is not going to be easy sledding from here. If they don't really turn it around, it would not shock me to see them either mutually part ways or dismiss Bobo outright at the end of the season. But yeah, like Coach said, Bobo has been dealing with some health issues. So we hope that all of that can get resolved and he can get back to focusing on what's happening on the field. But let's go from the bad to the good. Buffalo went into East Piscataway on Saturday and put down a whooping on the Scarlet Knights 42-13. Tyree Jackson threw for 3 touchdowns. Jarrett Patterson ran for 104 yards and 2 scores on only 14 carries. And Anthony Johnson topped the century mark again receiving. The Bulls held Rutgers to 284 total yards, and the Knights didn't help matters by committing 9 penalties for nearly 100 yards. Buffalo moves to 4-0 ahead of their big showdown with Army next weekend. After that game, they should be favored in all of their games moving forward, save for a road contest at Toledo. You know, all of us believed in Lance Leopold when he got hired, and he's really starting to show why. This is his 4th season, like Bobo, as head man in the City of Light, which I don't know why Buffalo is called the City of Light. It is not a light place. The Bulls could win double-digit games this year for the first time in program history. Even if they lose at Toledo, they can drop 2 from here and still win. They should be favored in all of them going forward. It's quite amazing what he's done there. I really hope that Leopold sticks around because, you know, you got to imagine that some of the bigger programs are going to be calling him, you know, sooner rather than later.
And more importantly, the Bulls are my 25th ranked team in my poll, which is, as we know, the best poll online. So
well, it's the most important
parade.
Yeah,
it's the most important one. Okay, gentlemen. Before we get to our deep roots,
they're not the only Bulls that are rolling right now. It'd be South Florida.
South Florida, yeah. Well, gents,
the 2 of them could meet in a game and be the Bull.
The Bull. Bull.
All right. With that, it is time to move on to our pop quiz. So, gentlemen, take out your number 2 pencils. Grab your blue books, and it is time to discuss receiving. So far this season, there are 14 players in college football who are averaging at least 100 yards receiving per game. If this rate holds, this will be the most players with 100 yards per game since the 2013 season. So, gentlemen, your task today, name the 14 players in college football who are averaging more than 100 yards receiving. Coach, I'm going to throw it to you first.
Ooh, I'm going to catch it first. So my first guess is going to be none other than Marquise Brown.
Hollywood Brown, yes, that is correct. 103 yards per game, good for 10th in the country.
So I'm not too optimistic about this one because we don't pass a whole lot in the Big Ten, and the 2 teams I watch the most of in the Big Ten, they pass about as few times as possible. So I struggled to come up with this at all, but one name that I feel like has been putting up some insane numbers is Jaws at Stanford, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside.
That is correct. 102 yards per game, good for 13th in the country.
Ooh.
And I believe it's Arcega. It's Spanish.
Arcega. Some people might get this guy confused with a midday TV judge. But Judge Judy?
Judge Judy. Ooh, sorry, Jerry Judy, not in the top 14. He is coming in at 91 yards per game.
The thing, though, the problem, Coach, is he gets those 91 yards on one catch.
That's true.
They don't pass it to him enough.
I know, right? They should.
All right.
Yeah. Okay, so I pretty much used the one name that I was confident on. So the next name I jotted down is someone who I used for the all-purpose yards because he's got an insane amount of all-purpose yards. So I'm going to go to the well again and hope that that fantastic freshman at Purdue, Rondale Moore, can come through for me a second time.
Sorry, he can't. He's just short, 93 yards per game.
All right.
Ooh. Okay. Well, a team that I just watched from my wheelhouse conference, that would be one Emmanuel Hall from Mizzou.
Yeah, that is an excellent choice. 107.5 yards per game, good for 8th in the country.
Nice. Here's another guy that I know has a ton of all-purpose yards, and I absolutely love him. He's probably my favorite player in the ACC. Give me Mr. Gregory Dortch down there at Wake Forest.
Dortch.
Greg Dortch. Oh, so close. 98 yards per game.
Oh no, I've got two strikes and Coach has none. I feel like I'm going down this week.
Coach has one.
I'm glad you gave one of my strikes back.
Yeah, that was very kind of you.
Yeah, I know, right? All right, so I'm about to catch up with you though. How about AJ Brown? I keep hearing
AJ Brown. Ooh, very good choice. Unfortunately, just short, 95.3 yards per game, 23rd.
Come on, Ole Miss.
I know.
Is anybody on Ole Miss's team? Or is he's got to be the leading receiver though.
He's leading receiver on Ole Miss. Yes.
Gotcha.
Nice.
Well, Josh, you both got 2 strikes.
Oh boy. Let's see. Man. I don't even know. I'm just thinking of like Big Ten names, and I'm sure none of them.
I'm going to give you guys both the names. A Big Ten is
close
to avoid.
So one name that I did jot down was Paris Campbell. You're telling me that's not a good name to go with?
No. Sorry.
Okay.
Paris Campbell, 74.8 yards per game.
I mean, is he leading the Big Ten at the very least?
Rondale Moore is leading the Big Ten.
Oh, okay. Let's see.
Guess.
Can I have another guess?
Yeah, sure. Why not? There aren't many rules in pop quiz, apparently.
I just want to do it based purely on how amazing a name it is. And he did have some pretty cool plays against Maryland. Lil Jordan Humphrey.
Lil Jordan Humphrey. I love Lil Jordan Humphrey. He's a fantastic receiver from Texas. He's averaging 88 a game.
All right. I think I'm out. It's all you, Coach.
Coach, you want to bring us home?
Bring us home. One, Antoine Wesley from Texas Tech.
Number 2 in the country, 128 yards a game.
Yeah.
Coach, you got anyone else off the dome?
Off the dome? Well, one of my favorite stories in recruiting, Colorado State, one of the lone bright spots, Preston Williams. He refers to himself as the career he wants to pursue is modeling.
102 yards per game. That is correct.
Nice.
Coach, bring the wood. You got anything else for us?
I'm my last guess, and this is probably gonna knock me out, but CeeDee Lamb.
CeeDee Lamb, no. He is at only 62 yards per game.
I do it. All right.
Guys, you missed number 1 receiver in the country. We talked about him a couple of weeks ago. Laviska Shenault from Colorado leads the country, 152 yards per game.
I didn't preview them, so.
Ooh, yeah, he just absolutely shredded.
That is a
Colorado or Nebraska.
An enormous number. I have to go back. I'm not sure the last time. So I don't know if anyone's ever averaged 150 yards per game. I'll have to get back to you on that later. Coach mentioned Antoine Wesley. After him, we've got Old Dominion's Jonathan Duhart, 125.5 yards per game. Following him, John Ursua. Josh, that's who I thought you were going to guess when you guessed Rondale Moore. He's at 125 yards per game. Adrian Hardy from Louisiana Tech. Tylan Wallace, Oklahoma State. Jamarius Way, South Alabama. Coach mentioned Emmanuel Hall. Kelvin Harmon, the ACC's leading receiver at NC State. He's got 104 yards per game. Coach mentioned Marquise Hollywood Brown. Rounding out the rest of the list, Poppy White at Ohio. Preston Williams, who was mentioned. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, who was mentioned. And finally, from the Mustard Buzzards, Quez Watkins. So that will do it for you. And so with that, let's move on to our deep roots. We'll start, Josh, with the game of the week, at least for the two of us. Primetime Saturday night was the 92nd ever matchup between Wisconsin and Iowa. It came down to the wire. The Badgers ended up winning 28-17. But coming out of this one, I'm not actually sure that Wisconsin is the better team. The Hawkeyes shot themselves in the foot a number of times, especially in the all-important third phase, turning the ball over twice in their punt return unit. Josh, you were at Kinnick for this one, so what did you make of everything?
Really, really simple that the better team lost to the better coached team. Iowa made silly mistake after silly mistake. They couldn't handle a simple Peter drill, something that you pretty much know from the beginning of your football career if you're going to be on special teams. They had 3 giveaways, didn't take anything from the Badgers. They had 3 red zone trips that yielded 10 measly points. At the end of the first half, they had a really nice 18-yard run that went out of bounds. Then they had a incomplete pass that was almost picked off. Then they ran it for 8 yards with about 50 seconds left, at that point there was about 35 seconds left in the game. And they just let the clock run out despite having 2 timeouts and running the ball really well. So, you don't have to call a Hail Mary to be aggressive. You can just kind of do your stuff and see what happens. But Iowa played the end of that half horribly. They were horrible on special teams. They were horrible at a certain red zone possession that I'm going to ask Coach about.
Ooh.
And all those things added up to the better team losing. And it's quite simple. Shall I ask Coach my questionable coaching, Matt?
Yeah, we might as well go with that. Yeah.
All right. So setting the table, first quarter action 0-0. Wisconsin receives the ball first. They have an 8-play drive that eventually stalls. Iowa gets that defensive stop. And, they drive the ball. They went from their own 15 all the way to the Wisconsin 5. And on a 3rd and 8, Iowa has a really nice pass play that ends just short of the yard to hit to get that new set of downs. And the Hawkeyes run up. They do some tempo. They run up, do a quarterback sneak. Stanley gains plenty of yards. And on top of that, Wisconsin was totally discombobulated, had multiple players off sides. Every ref threw a flag. And it was that obvious. And before calling the penalty, the head man says, hey, we're reviewing the spot on the previous play. Reviews it. Oh, confirm. The 3rd down pass didn't make a first. Iowa comes right back out and runs another quarterback sneak. This one Wisconsin's ready for, fails, 0 points come from it. So I have 3 questions related to this topic. And my first one is Iowa got that stop and then drove right down the throat of Wisconsin. Why is the team looking at a potential empty red zone trip so early in the game when it was clear they weren't massive underdogs? They didn't need to gamble and play catch up and think they needed to hit a high mark of points. So that's my question, Coach. Why go for it there?
To show confidence in your offensive line, say, hey, I believe in you. We're going to get these 6 points, and I think you guys can go out and get me a yard. And
perfect.
It happened that they didn't.
Fair enough. Second question. Coach, you did a good argument. I think you convinced a lot of people. That's why you go for it. So with that in mind, you are an offensive coordinator. Why are you calling another quarterback sneak?
That I don't know. Maybe I call a timeout there and try to figure out exactly what I want. I definitely don't want some big, long handoff. I can sort of see why he would call it, just maybe to push the pile and get maybe the fall forward yardage that they needed for the first down. But for me, I probably would have called a fullback dive or maybe like a quick pitch to try to, everybody's going to jam up the middle, so maybe just try to get the edge. I remember I had a situation where I was 4th and 2 and I called a jet sweep and they just played it really well, and I thought I had the edge, and they just flowed to it really well, and they got me. So I probably would have gone something off tackle or probably something to the perimeter quickly right there just to kind of catch them off guard.
And then my third question is for everyone, which is hockey. They have reviews, but they don't stop the play. They wait until there's a natural break in the action. So when a team runs tempo, in this case it was Iowa, stopping for the review hurt them. I'm wondering if in some way that can be changed, especially in a situation like this. Iowa's sneak got the first down, as well as Wisconsin being offsides. So Iowa had achieved their goal, getting a first down. The review was all about, did that third down play get the review? So reviewing that third down play was a total moot point because the play and the penalty had achieved whatever the review would have done. So I'm curious if there's some modification we can come up with to the rules that removes this potential scenario of a review going back and looking at something that's already been achieved, in this case, a first down.
Well, here's the deal, Josh. I think that the review rules are fine. I don't think we've had many issues with stopping play or, between downs, they buzz down and say, hey, let's review this. The thing that with this particular situation, I take a case-by-case basis most of the time. The problem I have with this scenario is not that they stopped play and stopped Iowa from their tempo. I think the bigger issue is you had every ref throw a flag. Why not, why not, even if you want to review it, just for review's sake, they're going to take the offside penalty. Why not just take the offside penalty and let that result in the first down, and let's go play ball? That's what really should have happened. So the mistake in the cluster blank from the refs is reviewing it, ignoring the penalty, and not awarding a first down. That's the screw up. It's not the I don't think we need to change the rules and how a review is taken. I really actually like it. But give them the first down because they jump outside. So there's a penalty. Can we not incorporate that into it?
So I guess what you really have to determine in this is, are plays completely discrete events, or is it sort of a more fluid situation? Because if they're completely discrete events, I think you have to do the replay right then and there, by the letter of the law in this case, obviously. And
yeah,
I know
every play is discrete.
Yeah, and so, and I am sympathetic to Josh's argument about the tempo, but I don't have a better system for it as it is. Because what if the ball was not properly spotted? And what if it was actually fourth and they were trying to determine on this play if they had crossed the first down yard marker. Right? Yeah,
in no way would have gone from 4th and inches to a first down. It was never going to.
It couldn't have been 4th and 2 instead of 4th and 1. So,
no,
because in that case, then that's very important. That 1 yard is huge, obviously. So yeah. I am sympathetic to your argument, and I think that there might be a way to legislate that in. I just think that the language necessary for that in the official rule book, it would be very intricate, shall we say.
Yeah, it gets kind of tricky when you try to retroactively do things in football. I think a lot of plays, or every play, kind of stands alone by itself, so you have to take care of it right then and there.
Yeah, it's not like hockey, which is much more fluid, which is why,
it affects potentially the next entire quarter of plays if you don't review that right then and there. So I don't have an issue with it because it needs to happen. They need to get it right. I'd rather them get it right. But in this case, we got to address how we review and how we incorporate penalties into the review. If you're reviewing it and you see a whole bunch of guys off sides, stop the review and said, all right, it's a 5-yard penalty from the previous spot. First down. Result of the play is first down. That's what the ref should have came on and said. But the question is, in the rules, are they looking for that, or are they just looking for the spot?
So, Josh,
that's what we got to address.
Yeah. So, Josh, I just want to, before we head on to our next game, I just want to jump back to something you said when you started talking about this game, was that the better team lost the game, but the better coach team won the game.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that's very reflective in the turnover column of this game.
Yep.
I mean, 3-0 is.
I think it's also reflective in just how the two offenses looked. I mean, Iowa was, seemed like they moved the ball at will, and with their tight ends and their passing game looking so crisp and
unstoppable. I don't know why they moved away from them in the second, late in the game.
Coaching.
I don't understand that. Whereas Wisconsin sort of saw what the Iowa defense was giving them and wasn't giving them, which was mostly Jonathan Taylor still had 113 yards, but those were 113 of the toughest yards he's ever had to run for.
Yeah, I think Tywan Deal was the real deal, but he felt like he was gutting Iowa more than Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, Deal's a punishing back. This is a fifth-year senior, former high four-star recruit out of DeMatha Catholic, that huge powerhouse out there in Maryland, and he's had to bide his time his entire career behind some really good backs, and he's had a lot of injury issues, but he's finally healthy, really, for the first time since he was a freshman. And he looks great. He looks really good. So it is heartening as a Badger fan to see him out there. But again, second game in a row, though, I'm still not supremely impressed with the Wisconsin offensive line. And now you have to worry about the fact that Tyler Biadasz, your All-American center, is seemingly out with an injury for an unknown amount of time. But one of the things that Wisconsin did in this case, they realized that their starting five offensive line weren't getting enough of a push, so they just put in 7 offensive linemen, which is the most it's attacking a problem. Instead of just using a hammer, it's using a sledgehammer. And I think just as the game went on, that just wore down so much of the Iowa defense that it opened up the pass for Wisconsin, opened up the play action pass for Wisconsin. And in doing so, that was one of our big complaints last week about the Badgers, Josh, was that they weren't running to set up the pass and Hornibrook looked off. Well, they did a much better job this week of putting Hornibrook in a position to make completable passes for him. So I was...
Yeah, and there were times, getting back to the coaching and just being prepared, and it's funny, Kirk's buzzwords for 20 years have been like preparedness and execution. I've never seen a team look less prepared and execute more poorly. There were times where linebacker would be against A.J. Taylor in the slot, and it's just like, you're having a linebacker cover Wisconsin's best receiver. Like, what are you doing? And there were a couple times where I saw linebackers and even a few corners let their guy go as if they were in zone, and then the safety is covering someone else up like it's in man. And it's like, wait, you just left someone wide freaking open because two guys didn't know what the play was. And that's like first game rust. That's not your conference opener week 4.
And that goes back to what you're saying about coaching, because in the first half, when A.J. Taylor was lined up on the outside, they started to move inside a little bit and noticed then that he was getting matched up on linebackers, and he was a much bigger factor in the second half.
Yeah, I don't know if Iowa has a dime or nickel package to run. At this point, it seems like they don't know what in the hell they're doing.
So, hey, Josh, can I ask you a question real quick?
Yeah.
This is sort of related, but I was always kind of curious about this because when I was growing up, there was very little Bulldogs in my family. To be honest, I had like one uncle and a couple of cousins that were Georgia fans, and then I had most of my family are Seminoles and Longhorns. I have a big contingent of family members out in Austin, so a lot of Longhorns in my family. So,
but obviously, your dad played for Florida State, like,
and my dad
a Noles fan first and foremost.
Yeah, I was. It was Noles 1,000%. Now we didn't go to as many games or any games really that you and your dad probably went to for the Hawkeyes. But things changed when I enrolled at the University of Georgia. I put my blood, sweat, and tears and got that little piece of paper that they call a degree from the University of Georgia. And now my team, first and foremost, are the Dogs, as you know. And then I have my other allegiances, my other family allegiances that I pull for, which is, obviously Florida State, Texas, and that's it. So my question to you is, Josh, you graduated from Wisconsin, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you – obviously Iowa's your team, right?
Yeah.
Your team growing up, that's a family thing. That's something you share with your parents. So what is your I'm just curious. I'm not attacking you, but what is your rationale by sticking with Iowa as your number one, even though you spent like I did your blood, sweat, and tears at the University of Wisconsin?
It's really, really simple for me. If I'd grown up in any town in Iowa other than Iowa City, I would have gone to the University of Iowa. To me, college is an opportunity for you to get out, see the real world, live someplace else. If I had gone to college in Iowa City, any conflict with my roommate, drive 15 minutes, spend the night back home. Oh, I got some laundry. 15 minutes away. I'll just go back and do it for free with my parents. I don't like the food in the cafeteria. Drive 15 minutes, get a home-cooked meal. To me, college is an opportunity to get out and see the real world. Obviously, I know Matt from Wisconsin, have some amazing friendships and memories there. But it was a place I lived for 4 years. It never outweighed now going on 32 years of fandom. My grandpa went to the University of Iowa. He'd been a ticket holder for probably about 60 years. My dad's closing in on probably about 50 years, he's probably closing in on about 40 years as a season ticket holder. There were seasons where we would go to all home games and like 3 or 4 road games. 1 year, a few years ago, we went to every road game but one. And that's just in our lifeblood. And the farther I've gotten away from Wisconsin, the less I care about their athletics. Honestly, if it wasn't for Matt, I probably would never give much of a crap about Wisconsin football. My brother's.
I'm glad I'm here for that, John.
Yeah,
my kept that in your life.
Yeah, my brother is similar with Michigan. Doesn't really when it's Iowa, Michigan. I've never seen him in maize and blue. And I think the last thing too, and Matt can testify to this. I'm legitimately pissed at the Wisconsin athletic department for my experience in college. They did a raffle system. I have 2 sports, college football, college basketball. I went 0 for 4 in winning the college basketball lottery.
I went 1 for 5.
Yeah, and that just tore me up. That pissed me off. College for football, I won the lottery freshman year, sophomore year, junior year. They used to do a kind of like a
graduated system. So you were a senior, you had 4 balls in the lotto. If you were a junior, you had 3.
Yeah.
Sophomore, 2 freshmen.
And pretty much like you were like if you were a 3-year ticket holder as a senior, you're guaranteed to get tickets. I didn't win tickets my senior year. So, if I went those 6 home games senior year, Matt, I probably went to like 1 or 2.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's just wrong. They, and at the Kohl Center, they stick the students in some of the worst seats.
Oh, for basketball? Yeah.
Yeah. And then just like game day atmosphere, the jump around is incredible, but the student section, horribly late arriving. It can be about half filled at kickoff. Their chants are really dumb. Like, I don't care. Like, I got the piece of paper from there. It got me out in the real world for 4 years. But to me, I care about Wisconsin about as much as I care about my high school. And I want them to do well because it's Matt's number one team. But generally speaking, I don't lose sleep over a Wisconsin loss, whereas I know for Matt it ruins his entire weekend. So, my weekend was kind of ruined for Iowa losing. If it had gone the other way, I would have been torn up a little bit for Matt, but I would have been privately thinking to myself, holy hell, we're in great position to make Indianapolis now.
Well, yeah, and for me, Josh, Josh, you and I have been friends for, almost 15 years now. And our friendship has taught me a lot about college football and sort of being a college fan.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like because you and I both, and then Coach obviously too, have a deep love for the sport.
Yeah.
And so I think my love for the sport even trumps my love for Wisconsin. And I think that you're the same way about Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that our friendship has also made me become much more pragmatic in my approach to sort of observing and understanding Wisconsin football. And not, I don't always have cardinal tinted glasses on.
Yeah.
And so it's been really great for me. And obviously, if it had gone the other way this weekend, I would have, been upset.
Yeah.
I would have been happy for you. So,
and I think, Coach, you also touch on something. I mean, you grew up a Florida State fan, but you didn't grow up in Tallahassee. You didn't go to all that many games. Matt, I know you grew up in upstate New York as well as New Hampshire, bounced around a little bit. So Syracuse was kind of your team, but I don't think you spent tons of Saturdays in the Carrier Dome.
I've been to 3 games in the Carrier Dome. They were all great.
I probably would have gone to more because Tallahassee's really not that far away from Atlanta. Had my dad not been a football coach and I'd been able to travel, I probably would have gone. But, I mean, I lived and died with every Florida State Miami game, every Florida State Florida game. That's where my hatred of Florida really grew.
It's easy to hate on Florida.
Seeing Spurrier spike his visor every Saturday was something to behold. I never really got into the Georgia Tech rivalry until I actually got into it as a student. So that was actually oddly enough, and I've probably grown up. I've probably been to more Georgia Tech games than any other game because it's right there. So conventional wisdom would say that I would probably lean towards Georgia Tech more, but I never really did.
Yeah.
And, I would always go when Florida State was in town. We'd always go to that. Tech games were easy, fun. I'd been to one Georgia Tech game before I enrolled, and that was because I was competing in the statewide punt, pass, and kick competition in which I've been.
You look like Andy Reid out there.
I could throw it a country mile. I couldn't punt it really. I couldn't keep it between the lines, at least.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a big difference that just my experience of being in Kinnick, when my brother and I kind of had to split duties with Dad, and me being the younger brother, it'd sort of be like, oh, I would get to go to the Iowa Kent State game. And then my brother would get to go to all the Big Ten games. But the nice thing was, my grandpa got extra seats. My dad always got 2 tickets. And so starting around the age of maybe about 10, I was going to every home game. So from 10 to graduating high school, I did not miss a home game. And I would go to several road games a year. And I think if I had grown up about...
If you grew up in your dad's, what if you grew up in your dad's hometown?
No, that's 45 minutes away from Iowa. From Iowa City. I would not have been able to go back every day or every weekend or whenever I wanted to go back. So
for me, Athens was almost 2 hours, so it was far enough away.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Madison was 20 hours. So for me, but
Yeah.
different story. Anyway, well, now that we've taken a nice trip down memory lane, I think we need to veer
That
back
clears it up a ton. Thank
into
you.
the
No problem.
and talk about our next game on the slate, which was the Alabama over Texas A&M. The Aggies had another valiant effort in their game against a top opponent, and while it wasn't quite as close as their game against Clemson from a few weeks ago, Texas A&M still showed me a lot, especially Kellen Mond. Coach, for the Crimson Tide, I mean, they're just a complete juggernaut at this point. So my question is, going forward, did Texas A&M expose any flaws of Alabama, if there are any?
I don't know. It just seemed like offensively, no. I mean, Tagovailoa was 22 of 30, so he was efficient. He threw for 387 yards, so he threw for a whole bunch of yards. He had 4 touchdowns and still only managed to get a 94.4 QBR, which blows my mind. But, I mean, I guess the only thing you could probably point at was that Kellen Mond was he threw for 196 yards, but he also almost rushed for 100 yards. So it kind of showed you that a dual threat quarterback could give them fits. But I mean, when you look at this team, they lost a lot of people, but there really aren't that many holes in this defense. There's really not that many weak spots in that offense. You look at the receiving stats. You had Henry Ruggs, 84 yards on 3 catches. Jerry Jeudy, 78 yards on 6 catches. Irv Smith, 74 yards on 4 catches. Devontae Smith, 4 catches, 56. Damian Harris, 2 catches, 48. I mean, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 receivers, all over 50, with the exception of Damian Harris, who I thought, he's 2 yards shy of 50. So I'll go ahead and count them in the statistic. The ball's just being spread out, and Tua is not locking in on one guy. So I'm nitpicking here when I say that Alabama's defense is probably prone to a dual threat quarterback.
Well, I mean, Kellen Mond still looked pretty good again this weekend, Josh. I mean, he is one of the most improved players in all of college football.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see much of him last year other than the UCLA game. That huge comeback, and he kind of looked like a deer in the headlights in his debut game.
He's certainly not that.
No, he was brilliant again. He had the 2 interceptions, which was one of the difference makers. When you're facing a team as good as Alabama, you can't lose the turnover battle by 2. That'll get you every time. And then the other thing, if you really want to nitpick it, just a terrible day on 3rd down for the Aggies, 3 of 12. And I think that these 2 teams are closer than that 22-point margin indicates, but just not quite enough playmakers quite yet for Texas A&M. They really struggled to run the ball outside of Kellen Mond. They don't have a running back that's really scaring people too much. The same thing happened against the Clemson Tigers earlier in the year. But A&M's moving the ball almost 400 yards on Alabama. Just the turnovers and 3rd down were backbreakers. And with Alabama's offense being so amazing now, you cannot give them that many opportunities. You can't give them the turnovers. You can't keep punching the ball to them.
All right, well, let's move on to our next game out in Eugene, where it was a wild one on Saturday night. Stanford roared back to win over the Ducks in overtime, 38-31. Oregon outgained the Cardinal 524 to 398 and held the ball for 11 more minutes than their counterparts from the Bay Area. But they turned it over 3 times, including twice in the red zone. Coach, is it just about the turnovers in this one, or did Stanford do something in particular to enable them to make the big comeback?
Well, the turnovers helped them wake up. And then once they woke up, Stanford does what Stanford does. They outplayed Oregon in every facet of the game after that fumble return for a touchdown. That just pretty much gave them all the momentum. And the what really just took the wind out of Oregon's sails was not only did Oregon get a touchdown overturned, which would have made it 31-7. Now we're looking at blowout city. That overturned touchdown put it first and goal from the 4. They botch a handoff. They fumble it. They get it back. And then they snap it over his head. Then they got, I think it was second and goal. Maybe it was third and goal from the 7. They snap it over the quarterback's head, and Stanford takes it back for a touchdown. It's now 24-14. Game on. Bryce Love does his thing. Stanford goes into overtime. Stanford's depth takes over, and victorious they are. But it just, they just started slow. They were sleepwalking through half of it. They weren't on top of their game. And when they finally woke up, Stanford does what Stanford does.
Josh, what were your reactions from this one?
Well, full disclosure, this game overlapped with me sitting in Kinnick, so I didn't see a single second of it. And because Fox Sports has the longest media timeouts that I think I've ever sat through, and the ref started to get booed every time they announced a media timeout. So, college sport, football, really doing a great job of endearing fans to wanting to have that in-game experience, So
I smell sarcasm.
So I didn't see much of this other than hearing about it afterwards, seeing it kind of play out on College Game Day Final, the crazy red zone turnover going back, all the way for Stanford was jarring. And my biggest takeaway, Stanford's amazing. They can pass it now. They have an offense equipped to come back. That's really, really scary, but this is going to be weird. My biggest takeaway is I thought Oregon was going to get kind of outclassed the whole game. For them to play so well in that opening half, for them to be toe-to-toe with Stanford, these two teams are essentially equal now. This rebuild from Mario Cristobal is way ahead than I would have ever thought. I sort of saw Oregon as like an 8-win bowl team coming into the year. Well, now I'm excited to see their game against Washington. Now I'm excited to see, does this team end 11-1? Like, my assessment of Oregon is totally readjusted based on them going toe-to-toe and looking at the stats and just sort of hearing about the comeback, not really getting an opportunity to see it.
If only they weren't in the same division, we could get this rematch potentially in the
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah.
I would definitely watch that again. If not for the only reason that Coach, my new favorite player in the country might be Colby Parkinson. He looks like he's, George Mirasan out there.
You know what? You're such a Wisconsin fan because one of your favorite players in the country right now is a giant tight end.
Yep.
I love that.
But his arms, he seems to have the longest arm. He just grabs passes from over people's heads all the time. He's wonderful. I hope
he's enormous and he mosses people.
Yeah, he's great. All right. Well, in a game that we all had wrong, Texas took TCU to the woodshed and defensively dominated the Horned Frogs, leading to 4 turnovers. Josh, has the last 2 weeks made you come around on Tom Herman at all, or are you still skeptical about his long-term viability in Austin?
I'm totally skeptical still. Frankly, knocking off Oklahoma, having a double-digit win season, knocking off West Virginia, surviving that trip to Lubbock. There's still a lot of landmines on this schedule. And when I was kind of looking at what in the world went wrong for TCU, I think there's a pretty easy explanation for it, Matt, that you will agree with following Big Ten football. Vintage Wisconsin did it last year, and when I say vintage, I'm thinking about the Ron Dayne teams especially, but Wisconsin has the potential to do this. And Ohio State does it constantly. They beat the snot out of you, and that second game is so hard to get up for. There's a lot of times where it feels like Ohio State beats you twice. And what happened a week ago in that game is Ohio State hammered TCU 182 rushing yards, slice and dice them 344 passing yards. I don't think Haskins had a stain on his jersey. So the offensive line for Ohio State was just mauling TCU for 60 minutes. And that is so much physical exertion to take that, of course, TCU was hung over a week ago. I think it was just Texas taking advantage of when that game came.
Yeah, definitely. Coach, what impressed you the most in this one?
Just the fact of, Texas just coming out and just beating physically TCU. I think it was one of those where it just never really seemed like TCU was ever in danger of getting control of that game. And, I know the score was 31-16 and it's not that much of a blowout, but I mean, that was a blowout, it's a good way of Texas ending a 4-year streak of humiliation over TCU. Just running the ball, beating them up physically up front, just doing pretty much anything they wanted to TCU, and Texas couldn't do anything wrong. So it was good to see that happen for Texas, for all my family out there in Longhorn land. That was a huge win for them. I was very, very much impressed with Lil Jordan Humphrey. And
get back at the beast, man. He's huge.
He really is,
and fast.
God Almighty! It's just a joy watching him run. Texas is kind of. I feel like I don't want to say they're good now. They're back, but they're 3-1. They're finally starting to kind of wake up a little bit, and they're finally starting to kind of play a little bit of good football here lately. So we'll see if they can keep that thing rolling. I think this puts a damper on my prediction of TCU playing up against Oklahoma in the conference title game. It's going to get a little bit murkier for that second spot, I think. But yeah, this was very surprising. I kept seeing the score, and I finally had to just flip over to the game every once in a while and just see what was going on. And I flip over just in time to see Lil Jordan Humphrey's 38-yard touchdown to kind of put the nail in the coffin. So that was one of those things. And then just I watched the highlights, and the 4 turnovers just were killers for TCU.
Yeah, they really were. All right. Well, we previewed a big SEC showdown in Lexington on last week's show, and we predicted that would probably be a close one, but it ended up being a very one-sided affair. But, and not necessarily in the manner that we would have expected either. Benny Snell ran all over Mississippi State to the tune of 165 yards and 4 touchdowns. I'm also sure that Joe Moorhead is pretty upset with the amount of laundry being thrown his team's way. They had 16 penalties for 139 yards. Coach, my question for you, though, is how was Kentucky able to keep the potent Bulldog offense at bay?
Well, those penalties certainly didn't help. But, they speed and, again, they just gave them fits and giving them different looks, coverage-wise, stunt-wise, blitz-wise, alignment-wise. They just messed with their alignments and just kind of destroyed their, what they were doing. Also, I think the speed aspect of it, Mississippi State has the second heaviest offensive line in the country by average, which has got to, I think, is north of 320 as an average across the board. So they just kind of took advantage of the size, and they did some things that made their defensive line unblockable at times. And so, again, and then, it's hard to combat the momentum you get from some slappy running back named Benny Snell. it's kind of hard to, once that momentum gets rolling, especially when Kentucky's playing at home, it can get south on you in a hurry.
Definitely. Josh, outside of Benny Snell, was there anything else that Kentucky was doing offensively that stood out to you?
Not really. And my biggest takeaway is that defense. I mean, we kind of assumed Stoops would get the defense rolling. It has started to kind of show at times the last few seasons. Hasn't quite been there consistently. This might be the breakout game for that defense. Benny Snell was amazing. Benny Snell, I think, might be the most electric player in the SEC, and that's factoring in all that excitement at Alabama, all that excitement at Georgia, Drew Lock, go on and on and on. But Benny Snell is just something special, and his charisma, too, makes him a great soundbite, much like Steve Spurrier was back in the day. But the defense for Kentucky, I mean, they made life miserable for Mississippi State.
Mississippi State averaged 2 yards per carry. That's absurd.
Yeah. And we've talked a lot. Let's be honest. We've talked a lot about Kentucky, and as we should. But just a side note about this game. I know 28-7 looks absolutely ugly. Bulldogs played terribly. This was their worst game in quite a while, regardless of it's Mullen or Moorhead. They were in it. It was a 14-point fourth quarter that turned this into a blowout. It was 14-7 most of the game. So Mississippi State still has a lot to like about this team. They still have a pretty good defense. They made Kentucky's day miserable trying to pass the ball. And I think if you want to sleep on Mississippi State, you're doing it at your own risk.
What's also demoralizing is you look at some of the differences in stats. Kentucky rushed for 229 yards. Mississippi State rushed for 56. And you just look at that and you're just like, wow.
Well, listen to Mississippi State's drive chart in the second half. Punt, 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 interception, turnover on downs, punt. Drives of 8 yards, 25, -5, -4, 14, -5.
And that probably factors in with the 16 penalties for 139 penalty yards. That doesn't help either.
Yeah, I mean, I think they clean up the penalties. The rest of the peripherals are pretty even between the teams, about the same amount of total yards, about the same amount of time possession. But
Mississippi State was better on third down. They converted 7 of 17.
So, anyway, we have to move on to our final game. And, Josh, you said that you're not sure who's going to challenge Oklahoma out there in the Big 12. But after one of the bigger upsets of the weekend, non-Old Dominion version, Coach GQ and the Red Raiders might want to be tossing their hat into that ring as they went on to the road to Stillwater and put a hurting down on Oklahoma State. Texas Tech put up 621 yards of total offense, including 224 on the ground, completely dominated this game. They held the ball for more than 41 minutes. Josh, I mean, we've all had our doubts about GQ.
Yeah.
But is this program starting to turn the corner after a rocky, probably past 2 seasons?
Well, I mean, they got blown out by Ole Miss to open the season. So let's not put the cart before the horse. But, awesome day, time of possession. They achieved that by that incredible 9 of 14 on third down mark. Alan Bowman, just a great day passing the ball, had the 2 picks, but outside of that, loved what he was doing. DeMarcus Felton ran left, right through Oklahoma State. So, yeah, you hang on to the ball for that long, you're going to have a pretty good day at the ballpark. And that's what Texas Tech is going to have to do against Oklahoma, against West Virginia, because the Pokes still moved the ball. And it's not like Oklahoma State had a horrible day and a million turnovers and stuff. They just didn't have any possession. In those 18 minutes and 43 seconds time of possession, the Pokes still put up 386 total yards and 258 through the air. I think this game speaks a lot to when things go right for Texas Tech, you're a scary team. And for Oklahoma State, their defense was looking improved, and that was one of the big reasons why they got ranked based on how that D performed against Boise State. But we should maybe dial back expectations a little bit for that Oklahoma State defense.
Coach?
Well, I mean, it's got to be a good day in Lubbock if you're leading ball carrier, rush for 130 yards. That's got to be something that you can hang your hat on. But, yeah, I'm not quick to press the panic button. It's just one of those games where Oklahoma State probably was just caught on their heels a little bit. So I'm not ready to push the panic button on them, and I'm not ready to quite to anoint King GQ either. So I think they found their guy in Alan Bowman. That's something that GQ has struck gold with. I mean, Bowman had probably his worst day of his career, throwing for 397 yards and 2 touchdowns. But I think it's, and I say that tongue in cheek, but they're sitting here 3-1, 1-0 in the conference, and they have a lot of confidence. You can't understate that. So, is it great for the program? Heck yeah, it's definitely great for the program when you consider where they've been, what they've dealt with this offseason, with Coach GQ being on the hot seat, and people speculating what's he going to do now that Pat Mahomes is gone. How's he going to replace that? How's he going to fix the defense, which has been steadily improving each and every season under David Gibbs? Can they find some sort of balance on offense? It looks like they're starting to do that. So some things are starting to come together for this Red Raider team, and it's kind of fun to watch. But it's something that you go into it with cautious optimism. Yeah, it's great that we're doing great. It's great that we are. We'll see how many times I can say great, by the way. It's wonderful that we walked in and beat the Cowboys on their turf, and we beat them badly. Now let's see if we can replicate this, and that's the challenge. Do it again next week.
Well, they're going to have to put up a lot of points next week because they're playing West Virginia.
Yes. Do it again next week against West Virginia. Then do it again, and do it again, and do it again. And when you play Oklahoma, do it again. Find a way to stop Kyler Murray. Find a way to lock down CeeDee Lamb. Find a way to lock down Marquise Brown. Find a way to take care of Rodney Anderson. Let's, lock up, get your ducks in a row. You can compete. You're showing that you can play some ball. Just go out there and execute. Same with Oklahoma State. Go out there and execute. It's a long season. Very long season. Being 0-1 in the conference means absolutely nothing. Same as being 1-0 in the conference means absolutely nothing at this point, because this is probably, I would venture to say, the most fluid league in all of FBS is the Big 12. Easily the most fluid league. When they say anything can happen, they're talking about the Big 12 first. Anything can truly happen.
Well, anything can happen except for anyone but Oklahoma winning the conference.
Well, unless you're Kansas, I should say.
All right. Well, that should do it for us here today. Josh, any final words?
Well, I know normally I would say we're bearing the lead and I'd have some funny stuff about the Arkansas football game. But I want to use this opportunity actually to just highlight Northwestern running back Jeremy Larkin. Bye week for Northwestern, but still a big loss. He is retiring from football due to a cervical stenosis. So it's a non-football type injury. It's as far as I know, it's a genetic thing that impacts his back, gets a little bit narrow, and it's not healthy for him with that back issue to play the sport. So he's retiring. He's meant a lot to Northwestern, trying to replace Justin Jackson this year, and he was off to a nice start, and he did really well as a backup for Justin Jackson. And so, he was a key cog for them. I'm sure Fitz and University will do right by him and find a way for him to get that injury hardships and stay on scholarship, get a great degree from Northwestern. It's just a shame that his football career has to come to an end.
Coach, any final words from you?
Well, Aunt Sally would be sad to know that the Georgia-Tennessee game will not be in our deep roots because Tennessee is god-awful, and they set football back about 10 years. So but that'll be something I address in the quick slants. And so when my picks lose, I'm not going to go kick a whiteboard like Jeremy Pruitt did on the sideline.
That was hilarious. Also, Josh, you mentioned Randall Moore earlier. Shout out to Purdue beating Boston College handily on Saturday, 30-13. So, all right, with that, guys, it's time for us to wrap up.
Purdue.
So on behalf of our own offensive coordinator, the coach, Corey Burton, in the Music City, and our third amigo in the Second City, from our intrepid blogger from Big Ten Accounting, Josh Cook, this is the Professor in Nashville saying so long and see you next time on the Illegal Motion College Football Podcast.
Jayhawks, number 7 in the Big 12.
Thanks for listening to the Illegal Motion College Football Podcast. To get in touch with the show, email us at illegalmotionpodcast@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter at illegal_motion.